December 21st, 1978. A freezing Chicago night. Detective Daniel Gendy lies flat on his stomach, flashlight in hand, dragging himself through the narrow crawl space beneath an ordinary suburban home. The beam of light cuts through darkness as he sweeps it across the dirt floor. Something catches his eye, a patch where the soil looks different, disturbed. The homeowner, a respected local businessman who performs as a clown at children's hospitals, watches from the doorway above. His face betrays nothing. Genty reaches forward, pushes his gloved fingers into the soft earth, and begins to dig. The smell grows stronger, unbearable. Then his hand touches something. Something that shouldn't be there. Something that will change American criminal history forever. What the detective pulls from that dirt will reveal a house of horrors hiding in plain sight. A nightmare that had been unfolding for 6 years while neighbors waved hello to the friendly man next door. How many bodies are buried beneath those floorboards? And how did one man manage to hide his darkest secret from an entire city for so long?
Welcome to Truth Finder Afees. In today's case of the day, we're diving into one of the most disturbing serial killer investigations in American history, the case of John Wayne Gacy, the killer clown. Do not forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. Your support helps us continue bringing these true crime stories to light. Now let us get into it.
Chicago, 1942. As war rages across the Atlantic, a baby boy is born into a modest home on the city's northwest side. They name him John Wayne Gacy, a name that would one day send chills down the spine of an entire nation. But on that March morning, he's just another child of the war years, born to working-class parents with simple dreams. The house on West Washington Street holds dark secrets behind its ordinary facade. Inside these walls, young Johnny learns his first and most devastating lesson. Monsters are real, and sometimes they're the people who should protect you. His father, John Stanley Gacy, moves through the home like a storm, unpredictable, violent, fueled by alcohol and rage. The elder Gacy's words cut deeper than his blows. "You're worthless. You'll never be a man. You're stupid." These poisonous seeds, planted in childhood, would bloom into something unspeakable decades later. While his mother, Marion, attempts to shelter her son from the worst of his father's fury, she remains a passive figure, loving but powerless against her husband's tyranny. Johnny learns to survive by becoming invisible, by reading the subtle shifts in his father's mood, by anticipating the explosion before it happens. These aren't skills a child should need to develop, but they serve as early training in manipulation and perception, tools that would later make him so dangerous. At 11, fate deals Johnny another cruel hand. Diagnosed with a congenital heart condition, doctors restrict his activities, confining him to the sidelines while other boys play. Already isolated at home, this medical sentence creates a deeper alienation. His classmates mock his weight, his inability to participate, his eagerness to please. Each taunt is another brick in the wall between Johnny Gacy and normal emotional development. Yet something remarkable emerges from this broken childhood. Johnny develops an uncanny ability to charm adults. Teachers note his helpfulness, his politeness, his seemingly genuine desire to please authority figures. It's as if he's crafting a separate self, one that exists outside the damaged boy from West Washington Street. This duality, this ability to compartmentalize and present different faces to different audiences, becomes his survival mechanism.
The teenage Gacy works multiple jobs, saving money, planning his escape from his father's shadow. After high school, he flees to Las Vegas, briefly working in a mortuary, an eerily prescient choice given his future crimes. But Chicago's gravitational pull brings him home, still searching for something to fill the void inside him. In his early 20s, Gacy seems to find solid ground. He meets and marries Marlon Myers in 1964, the daughter of a successful businessman who owns Kentucky Fried Chicken franchises in Iowa. For the first time, doors open for John Wayne Gacy. His father-in-law offers him management positions in Waterloo. He becomes a father himself. A son and daughter arrive in quick succession. On weekends, he throws himself into the JCs, a civic organization where his energy and charm win admirers. The transformation appears complete, from abused child to respected community leader. Local newspapers feature his community service. Neighbors invite the Gacys to dinner. John Wayne Gacy, it seems, has escaped his past and become the man his father said he never could be. Then, like a fault line suddenly shifting, everything ruptures. In 1968, allegations surface that Gacy has sexually assaulted a teenage employee. The boy's testimony is damning. He describes being lured to Gacy's home, plied with alcohol, and assaulted. The court convicts Gacy of sodomy, sentencing him to 10 years in the Iowa State Penitentiary. But the system that should protect potential victims fails catastrophically. After serving just 18 months, a mere 18 months for a sexual assault on a minor, Gacy is released for good behavior. The parole board sees only the mask, the charming community leader who made one terrible mistake. They cannot see what lurks beneath. During his incarceration, Marlon divorces him and takes full custody of their children. When Gacy walks out of prison in 1970, he has lost his family, his reputation, and his place in Iowa society. What he hasn't lost is his ability to reinvent himself, and the dark impulses that prison has only taught him to better conceal. As he boards a bus back to Chicago, John Wayne Gacy leaves behind the ruins of his first attempt at normal life. Ahead lies a new beginning in his hometown, and the horrifying path that will lead to the crawl space on Somerdale Avenue, where the true cost of his broken childhood will be paid by others.
The Chicago that welcomes back John Wayne Gacy in 1970 knows nothing of his Iowa disgrace. In an era before instant background checks and sex offender registries, his conviction remains trapped in paper files across state lines. This blind spot in the system offers Gacy something precious: a second chance, a clean slate, an opportunity to perfect his mask. He moves into his mother's modest home, stepping back into the role of dutiful son. But Gacy has learned from his mistakes in Iowa. This time, he won't rely on someone else's business for success. Drawing on construction skills acquired in prison workshops, he establishes PDM contractors. The name itself, painting, decorating, and maintenance, suggests reliability, craftsmanship, service. The business cards he proudly hands out bear no hint of their owner's true nature. Within months, PDM Contractors begins to thrive. Gacy's charm translates perfectly to sales. He secures contracts for residential and small commercial projects throughout Chicago's northwestern suburbs. His prices are reasonable, his work adequate. But it's his hiring practices that reveal the first glimpse of the predator's strategy. He specifically recruits young men, often teenagers, as helpers and apprentices. "I'm giving these kids a chance," he tells clients and neighbors, positioning himself as a benefactor to youth. No one questions why a small contractor needs so many temporary employees, or why these young men seem to cycle through PDMs so quickly. The pattern is established, but invisible to all who encounter it. By 1972, business success allows Gacy to purchase the house that will become synonymous with horror, 8213 West Somerdale Avenue in the unincorporated Norwood Park Township. From the street, it's utterly unremarkable, a ranch-style home with aluminum siding, a detached garage, and a small garden. No one can see the crawl space beneath the floorboards, the space that Gacy eyes with a purpose no home inspector could possibly imagine. That same year brings another milestone in Gacy's reconstruction of normalcy: marriage to Carol Hoff, a divorcee with 2 young daughters. Their romance seems plucked from a Hallmark movie. They had known each other in high school and reconnected at a family gathering. To Carol, John represents stability and kindness. She later recalls how attentive he was during their courtship, how gentle with her daughters, how eager to build a life together. The wedding photos show a beaming couple, Gacy's round face split by a wide smile, Carol elegant in white, her daughters serving as flower girls. They honeymoon in the Wisconsin Dells, return to Somerdale Avenue, and begin creating what appears to be a perfect blended family. Holiday gatherings, backyard barbecues, birthday parties. The Gacys become fixtures in the neighborhood's social fabric. But John Wayne Gacy is just getting started with his masterwork of deception. Understanding that respectability requires community involvement, he begins volunteering for the Norwood Park Township Street Lighting Committee. His attention to detail and willingness to handle paperwork quickly elevate him to chairman. Local Democratic Party officials notice his organizational skills and recruit him to help with campaigns. Soon Gacy is managing Polish Constitution Day parades, organizing neighborhood cleanup initiatives, and attending fundraising dinners for local politicians. Photographs from this period show him in suit and tie, shaking hands with officials, always positioned near the center of the action. His network expands with each event, creating layers of protection around his secret self. Then comes the most bizarrely incongruous element of Gacy's public persona, his alter ego as Pogo the Clown. Joining the Jolly Jokers Club, a group that performs at charity events and children's hospitals, Gacy develops his own distinct clown character. He sews the satin costume himself. He perfects a unique makeup design with sharp-angled eyebrows and a mouth painted over, rather than around, his natural lips. As Pogo, Gacy entertains children across Chicago, twisting balloons into animal shapes, performing simple magic tricks, posing for photographs with delighted kids on his knee. The contrast is almost too terrible to contemplate. The same hands that gently shape balloon dogs for hospitalized children will, hours later, tighten a rope around a young man's neck. His community involvement reaches its pinnacle and most chilling irony. In May 1978, when he meets First Lady Rosalind Carter at a Polish Constitution Day event. The photograph of their handshake later becomes evidence of Gacy's extraordinary ability to deceive. The Secret Service, which screens all who meet the First family, finds nothing in their background check to raise concerns about John Wayne Gacy, respected contractor and Democratic precinct captain. But beneath this carefully constructed facade, Gacy's personal life is unraveling. By 1976, his marriage to Carol collapses. Later, she tells investigators about disturbing patterns, their sex life evaporating, finding men's wallets and ID cards in the house, hearing strange noises from the garage at night. Most alarming are the unexplained odors. The smell from beneath the house grows so unbearable at times that guests comment on it. Gacy blames sewer problems, dampness, even dead rodents. After Carol leaves, taking her daughters, Gacy abandons any pretense of conventional home life. The house on Somerdale Avenue becomes a bachelor pad where he hosts raucous parties for political associates and business contacts. Alcohol flows freely at these gatherings, sometimes drugs. Music and laughter mask what lies beneath the floorboards. The man who emerges from this period of Gacy's life is a study in contradictions. To his political associates, he's hardworking John, always ready to volunteer. To his business clients, he's reliable Mr. Gacy, who shows up when promised and cleans up after the job. To the children at hospitals and events, he's Pogo the Clown, bringing momentary joy to difficult lives. And to the young men who continue to disappear across Chicago, he's something else entirely, a nightmare from which they will never wake. By 1978, John Wayne Gacy's double life is operating with terrifying efficiency. The respected businessman and community volunteer has created the perfect cover for the predator. The house on Somerdale Avenue, with its ordinary exterior and unspeakable secrets, stands as a monument to his success at deception. No one, not neighbors, not political associates, not clients, suspects that the affable man in the clown suit has been killing for years, filling the crawl space beneath his home with the evidence of his true self.
The exact moment when fantasy became reality for John Wayne Gacy, when violent urges transformed into actual murder, remains unknown. Like stepping off a cliff in darkness, Gacy crossed the threshold sometime in 1972 from which there was no return. What followed was one of the most prolific killing sprees in American criminal history. His hunting grounds were the places where vulnerable young men could be found: Chicago's Greyhound bus terminal where runaways and drifters arrived daily, Bughouse Square, a park known for its gay community, or simply the streets of Chicago's North Side, where hitchhiking was still common practice. Sometimes victims came directly to him, answering newspaper ads for construction work at PDM contractors. The pattern was methodical, refined with each killing. Gacy would approach a young man, typically between 14 and 21 years old, and introduce himself as a contractor offering good money for odd jobs. To those struggling financially, the prospect of earning $50 for a few hours' work seemed like extraordinary luck. Other times he would pose as a police officer, flashing a fake badge and ordering young men into his car. The authority gambit proved particularly effective with runaways, already afraid of official attention. Once the victim entered Gacy's black Oldsmobile, a car neighbors came to recognize as it cruised slowly through certain neighborhoods, the trap was set. He would drive them to the house on Summerdale Avenue, often stopping to buy food or alcohol on the way. This small kindness served two purposes. It lowered the victim's guard and, more practically, introduced alcohol into their system, making resistance more difficult. Inside the house, Gacy would show the young man around, pointing out projects that needed work, discussing payment. Then would come the suggestion of a drink, a moment to relax before starting. As they sat in Gacy's living room, surrounded by ordinary furnishings, family photos, a television, nothing to suggest danger, he would propose a demonstration. "I learned this trick from a clown," he would say, producing a pair of handcuffs. "It's an escape technique." He would offer to show how the cuffs worked, often demonstrating on himself first, unlocking them with a key hidden nearby. When it was the victim's turn, the key would mysteriously disappear. The moment the metal closed around the young man's wrists, the performance ended, and the true horror began. What followed was a methodical process Gacy called his rope trick, a system of torture and murder he refined over years. Most victims endured sexual assault before death. Some were kept alive for hours or even days, restrained in a specially constructed device in Gacy's bedroom that allowed him to control their movements while leaving his own hands free. The killing itself was typically by strangulation, using a tourniquet method with rope or cord that Gacy could tighten gradually. This technique allowed him to repeatedly bring victims to the edge of unconsciousness, then release the pressure, reviving them to endure more terror before the final moments. Medical examiners would later determine that most victims remained conscious during the assaults that preceded their deaths, fully aware of what was happening. After death came disposal, another process Gacy had carefully planned. The house on Summerdale Avenue featured a crawl space accessible through a trap door in the closet of a spare bedroom. This cramped area, with barely 28 inches between dirt floor and floor joists above, became Gacy's private cemetery. He would drag bodies to the trap door, lower them into darkness, then shimmy down himself with a shovel. The trenches he dug were shallow, just deep enough to cover a body. As space grew limited, he began stacking remains on top of each other. To control the inevitable odor, he poured quicklime over the bodies and installed putty pads on floor vents to seal off smells. When the stench became noticeable despite these measures, he would tell neighbors about persistent plumbing problems. 29 victims found their final resting place in that crawl space. 4 more were buried elsewhere on the property, 3 in the backyard and 1 under the concrete floor of the garage. When even these spaces were filled, Gacy began disposing of bodies in the Des Plaines River, driving to remote bridges in the pre-dawn hours to drop weighted remains into flowing water. Throughout this 6-year killing spree, Gacy maintained his public life without a single significant slip. He hosted political meetings in his living room, with guests unaware that just feet below the floorboards lay the decomposing remains of multiple victims. He continued performing as Pogo the Clown at children's hospitals on the same weekends he was burying bodies beneath his house. The compartmentalization was absolute and terrifying in its effectiveness. Some victims had names and stories that would later be reconstructed. Timothy McCoy, 15, was Gacy's first known victim, a Nebraska youth visiting Chicago who had the misfortune to encounter Gacy at the Greyhound terminal. John Butkovich, 17, was a PDM employee who had argued with Gacy about unpaid wages before disappearing. Russell Nelson, 21, was an architecture student with a bright future. Gregory Godzik, 17, worked briefly for PDM before becoming victim number 20. Robert Gilroy, 18, was the son of a Chicago police sergeant. Others would remain nameless for decades, identified only by the numbered evidence tags attached to their remains. The anonymity of these victims, mostly working-class boys, many estranged from families or living on society's margins, had aided Gacy's ability to continue killing. Their disappearances generated less media attention, less police focus, than might have been the case for more prominent victims. Not all who entered Gacy's house became victims. Some survived to tell tales that tragically went largely unheeded. In December 1977, Jeff Rignall was picked up, chloroformed, and taken to Gacy's house where he was repeatedly assaulted before being inexplicably released. Rignall reported the crime to Chicago police, even attempting to locate the house again by driving through neighborhoods, but the investigation generated little official action. Another survivor, Robert Donnelly, was abducted in December 1977, tortured for hours, then released. Like Rignall, Donnelly immediately reported his ordeal, providing details about his captor's appearance and vehicle. This report too languished without significant follow-up, missed opportunities that cost additional lives. As 1978 progressed, Gacy's behavior grew increasingly reckless. The pace of killings accelerated. Where earlier murders had been separated by weeks or months, victims now disappeared in quicker succession. He began keeping trophies, class rings, driver's licenses, articles of clothing, items he would sometimes show to visitors with manufactured explanations about their origin. On the evening of December 11, 1978, John Wayne Gacy made his final mistake. After completing a remodeling job at Nissan Pharmacy in Des Plaines, he spotted 15-year-old Robert Piest, who worked there as a stock boy. Gacy offered Piest a construction job at the enticing rate of $5 per hour, nearly double what the teenager earned at the pharmacy. Before leaving, Piest told his mother about the offer, saying he would speak with the contractor briefly and return immediately for a ride home. When he failed to come back, Kim Piest contacted the Des Plaines police. Unlike reports about previous victims, this disappearance generated immediate action. Robert Piest was not a runaway or drifter. He was a clean-cut high school sophomore from a stable family that noticed his absence within minutes. The investigation triggered by Piest's disappearance would finally expose what lay beneath the house on Somerdale Avenue. John Wayne Gacy's reign of terror was about to end, but the full horror of his crimes was just beginning to emerge.
On the morning of December 12, 1978, Lieutenant Joseph Kozenzak of the Des Plaines Police Department begins what he believes is a routine missing persons case. 15-year-old Robert Piest failed to return home the previous evening after work at Nissan Pharmacy. His mother reports that Robert mentioned speaking with a contractor about a summer job before disappearing. Kozenzak's first step is simple due diligence: identify this contractor. At the pharmacy, the manager confirms that a man named John Wayne Gacy had completed renovation work there on December 11th. He had been alone in the store for periods, with opportunity to speak with young employees. This name, John Wayne Gacy, means nothing to Kozenzak at first. It's simply the first thread in what will become an investigation unlike any in Chicago's history. But when Kozenzak runs a background check, the ordinary missing persons case suddenly transforms. John Wayne Gacy has a prior conviction for sodomy with a teenage boy in Iowa. This criminal history, combined with being the last person to see Piest, moves Gacy from person of interest to prime suspect within hours. On December 13th, Kozenzak and a team of officers arrive at 8213 West Somerdale Avenue with a search warrant. Gacy isn't home, but officers immediately notice peculiarities about the house. Despite the December chill outside, the interior is sweltering, with the thermostat set to maximum. Windows are tightly sealed. A cloying scent of air freshener permeates every room, yet fails to completely mask an underlying odor officers can immediately identify. When Gacy returns to find police at his home, he displays neither panic nor hostility, just mild irritation at the inconvenience. He readily admits being at the pharmacy, but denies any interaction with Robert Piest. His demeanor is cooperative yet dismissive, suggesting police are wasting their time. This practiced calm, this ability to look directly at officers searching for a missing boy and show neither fear nor guilt, is the culmination of years of successful deception. As police search the premises, small discoveries begin accumulating. A false driver's license bearing the name John Scyc is found in Gacy's bedroom. Officers note the photograph doesn't match Gacy. In the same drawer, they find several rings, none Gacy's size. Most damning, a photo receipt from Nissan Pharmacy, the same one found in Robert Piest's jacket left at work, is discovered in Gacy's trash. These items raise suspicion but don't constitute sufficient evidence for arrest. Police depart but place Gacy under surveillance. For the next week, he continues his normal routine, meeting with political associates, visiting job sites, shopping for groceries, all while detection vehicles maintain constant observation. At one point, Gacy even invites surveillance officers in from the cold for coffee, engaging them in casual conversation about neighborhood crime. On December 19th, armed with additional warrants based on growing suspicion, police return to Somerdale Avenue. This time, investigators focus on a strange odor emanating from heating vents. When questioned, Gacy offers explanations ranging from sewer backup to moisture problems. But when evidence technician Daniel Jenny crawls beneath the house to investigate, the investigation reaches its turning point. In the beam of his flashlight, Jenny notices that the dirt floor of the crawl space appears disturbed in several areas. Digging in one such spot, he uncovers what appears to be a small fragment of decomposed flesh. Further excavation reveals what unmistakably looks like a human arm bone. Jenny emerges from the crawl space, face ashen, and delivers the news that will transform everything. "We've got a body down there." Meanwhile, at the Des Plaines police station, Gacy is undergoing intensive questioning. For hours, he maintains composure, parrying questions with practiced responses. But as the night of December 21st stretches into the early hours of December 22nd, detectives employ a strategy that finally cracks his facade. They tell him about the discovery in his crawl space, a bluff based on Jenny's preliminary findings. In that moment, the performance that John Wayne Gacy has maintained for years finally collapses. His shoulders slump. His voice changes. "There are bodies in my house," he admits to the stunned investigators. When asked how many, he pauses, then responds with chilling nonchalance. 20-something. What follows is one of the most gruesome recovery operations in American criminal history. Cook County Medical Examiner Dr. Robert Stein assembles a team of pathologists, evidence technicians, and archaeology students to assist with the methodical excavation. The winter weather complicates their efforts. The ground in the unheated crawl space is partially frozen, requiring space heaters to thaw the soil enough to dig. The working conditions are nightmarish. The space measures just 28 inches from dirt floor to the joists above, forcing investigators to lie on their stomachs as they excavate. The stench becomes so overwhelming that officers work in 15-minute shifts, wearing masks soaked in cologne or mentholated ointment. Psychological support is brought in for the recovery team, many of whom will carry the trauma of these weeks for the rest of their lives. Body after body emerges from the earth. Some are little more than skeletons, having been buried for years. Others retain clothing and personal effects that might aid identification. The remains are carefully documented, photographed, and transported to the Cook County Medical Examiner's office, where the painstaking work of identification begins. Throughout the investigation, Gacy maintains an eerie cooperation. He provides detailed diagrams of the crawl space, marking burial locations with X's. He describes his killing method with clinical detachment, referring to the murders as eliminations. When asked about specific victims, he rarely remembers names. These young men were objects to him, not people. Beyond the 27 bodies recovered from the crawl space, investigators discover one victim buried beneath the concrete floor of Gacy's garage and 3 more in shallow graves in the backyard. When questioned about Robert Piest, Gacy finally admits to killing the boy and disposing of his body in the Des Plaines River, his more recent method of disposal when the ground beneath his house could hold no more. A massive search operation is launched along the Des Plaines River, complicated by winter ice and snow. Despite these challenges, on April 9, 1979, Robert Piest's body is finally recovered, bringing closure to the family whose report had ultimately stopped a serial killer. The identification process for Gacy's victims continues for decades. In 1979, forensic science lacks the DNA technology that would later revolutionize identification of remains. Investigators rely on dental records, distinctive clothing, and physical characteristics to put names to the dead. At the time of Gacy's trial, 8 victims remain unidentified, known only by the evidence tags assigned to their remains. As news spreads about the mass grave beneath Gacy's house, hundreds of families with missing sons contact authorities. The Cook County Medical Examiner's office becomes a pilgrimage site for parents carrying dental records and photographs, hoping for the terrible closure of learning their child's fate. Some receive answers. Others continue their agonizing wait for information that may never come. By February 1979, prosecutors have assembled enough evidence for a 33-count murder indictment. Beyond the physical evidence, they have Gacy's own confessions and maps showing burial locations. As he awaits trial in Cook County Jail, Gacy occupies himself painting clown portraits and giving interviews. He appears almost relieved that his double life has ended, telling one interviewer, "I should have been caught a long time ago." The investigation into Gacy's crimes reveals not just the extent of his murders, but the systemic failures that enabled them. Reports of missing young men had been handled inconsistently across different police jurisdictions. Complaints from survivors had generated minimal follow-up. Gacy's prior conviction in Iowa hadn't triggered scrutiny when young men began disappearing near him. These institutional blind spots had created perfect conditions for a predator to operate undetected for years. Lieutenant Kozenzak, whose initial thoroughness in pursuing Robert Pius' disappearance led to Gacy's capture, later reflected that the case permanently changed how missing persons reports are handled. No longer would young men's disappearances be dismissed with assumptions they had simply run away. The grim discoveries beneath the house on Somerdale Avenue ensured that future reports would be treated with the urgency they deserved, a small measure of justice for the 33 young men who never came home. 33 young men and boys. 33 lives cut short. 33 families forever changed by one man's unspeakable actions. The story of John Wayne Gacy forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about human nature. Behind the painted smile of a clown, behind the facade of the helpful neighbor, behind the mask of the respected businessman, darkness can hide in plain sight. Perhaps the most disturbing lesson from the house on Somerdale Avenue isn't about Gacy himself, but about us, how easily we accept the faces people present, how we see what we want to see, and how the monsters among us count on that very human tendency. In the decades since Gacy's execution, forensic science has evolved dramatically. DNA technology has given names to those who remained unknown for too long. Yet even today, families of missing persons wait for answers, for closure, for the simple dignity of knowing where their loved ones rest. If this case has affected you as deeply as it has affected so many others, please consider subscribing to Truth Finder Afees. Your support allows us to continue shining light into history's darkest corners. Hit that notification bell to join us next week when we explore the mysterious disappearance of Asha Degree case. Thank you for bearing witness to these stories. In remembering the victims, we ensure they're never truly forgotten. From all of us at Truth Finder Afees, stay safe, stay vigilant, and remember, sometimes the truth is hiding right next door.